So we just looked at the code that rendered this page here. So next, what we're going to do is look at what happens when we type in a command. So the first thing we did was type in south. And when we did that and pressed enter, it said, "You're in a beautiful garden, smell the flowers, witness the ominous clouds." So let's go ahead and go through our code one more time after we submitted that command. So I'm going to go back to the browser here, and I'm going to scroll up to the top. So the first thing we run is the start adventure session function. So let's jump to that code here. We run session start so we can use the session variable. And then we check to see if the location session variable is not set. It is set, and so this code doesn't execute, and we go back up here. We initialize our data and log array variables, and then we can go ahead and skip all of these functions here, which are conveniently grouped together. Next, we have all of our data here. We don't need to go through this again, so we can go ahead and skip all of this. And now we come to some processing. So we check to see if the command post variable is set, which it is this time. Again, that's the text input that we input our command into. And because that's set, we're going to run this code, run command, and we're going to pass it the value. Now again, this is the word south. So let's go ahead and jump to run command. Now just a quick tip, in a lot of integrated development environments or IDEs or text editors, you can hold down a special key and then click on the function in order to jump to it. So see, when I clicked it, we jumped right up here to line 27 where run command is defined. Okay, so we passed the word south to run command. First, what we're doing is we're globalizing several variables. Now remember, data includes the descriptions and possible commands that we can run for each one of the places on our map. Log array includes the information that's going to display in our output. And then standard text includes a number of different possible results from commands that we can run no matter where we are on the map. Now what happens when we use this global keyword is that this variable now becomes available anywhere. So normally data wouldn't be available in this function. The only variable we'd have is command. So this is kind of nice because now we can pull all of that data in without explicitly passing it in as a parameter to run command. But the downside is that now that data variable is global for every function. So if another function, for example, sets data to a different value, it will replace all of the values that we added inside of that variable. And that's the reason why having a limited scope for each variable is really useful. If, on the other hand, we passed data as a parameter here, then we wouldn't need to worry about accidentally overwriting some of the data because it would be a whole new variable. So by the time we get here, we actually have 4 variables available for us to work with. We have command, data, log array, and standard text. In this next line, we have a set of global commands, and this is an array that includes reset, wait, and pick nose. Now in this next line, if our command is inside of these global commands, remember how we typed in reset earlier, then we're going to switch based on that command. Right now we've input south, and so this condition will be false and this if statement won't run, and we can go ahead and skip it. Next, we're going to take the command and we're going to make it all lowercase so it's easier to check what the command is. What this allows the user to do is input all capital letters or random capital letters, but as long as the text is the same, it will pass as the command. So this is probably the first time that you've seen the string to lower function, but it can be useful in cases like this. It can also be useful if we want to maintain a certain convention of all lowercase letters for some text, and potentially uppercase just the first letters. Okay, in this next, what we're doing is grabbing the list of commands from the data for this particular location where we're at. So what we're going to do is check to see what the location is by pulling the location session variable, which at this point will be house because it was set to that by default. And then it's going to grab the commands inside of the data that has that key of house. If we scroll down and take a look, the data would be right here. We have house, and then commands would be this. So we'll end up with an array where the commands are the keys, and then the processes to run are the values. Okay, let's go ahead and scroll back up again. So next, we're going to check to see if the value that the user input is actually a valid command. And the way we can do that, because we have an array where the keys are the potential commands, we can check to see if a key exists inside of an array by using the keyExist function. So this function takes 2 parameters. The first is the key that we're going to check for, and the second is the array that includes the keys that we're going to check against. In this case, we have 4 or 5 commands we're going to check against, and south is actually one of those commands that we can run. So this key exists will return true, and the code inside this if statement will run. Next, we're going to take the PHP code that corresponds to this particular key. So it's going to be the south key in the commands variable. And if we scroll down, we can take a look at what that code is by looking at the data. So under commands here, we have south as the command. And so the data is going to be moved to, so the function move to, and we're passing the phrase garden to it. I'm going to scroll back up to the eval so we can take another look at that. So what the eval function, which is short for evaluate, will do is take a string and process it as if it was PHP. Now it's important to note here that this can be very dangerous if we're taking user-submitted data, because somebody could accidentally, for example, wipe out a bunch of your files by processing a certain PHP statement if you accept that and then run it as PHP. The reason why we can do this safely is because we're setting what this command value is in our code, so we have full control over that data. If you don't have full control over that data, then you'll need to think very carefully about whether you want to use eval at all. Okay, so again, the command is move to, and we're passing garden. So let's go ahead and take a look at the move to function. Now another tip for many text editors is that you can find a list of the functions that have been defined on the page by clicking on a certain area. In Komodo, down here at the very bottom, I can click this and we'll see a list of the functions that are defined on this page. In this case, I want to jump to the move to function. And here we are. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down so we can see the full thing. So again, we're passing the word garden to move to. We're globalizing the data variable with the global keyword here. Now, data has already been globalized, so this is redundant, but we're setting it here just so that we know that this is something that we want to use in this function. And maybe there will be a case where another function doesn't globalize it first. And we're also globalizing the log array. So there's 2 things we need to do when we move. The first is to change the location in the session variable where the user currently is, and the second is to display the description of the new place where the person is. So here in this first line, what we're doing is setting the location session variable to place, in this case garden, and then we're adding an item to the log array, which we're eventually going to print out in the display, to the description of the place. So we're going to look at the data array, in particular the garden key inside of that array, and look for the description of that. And if we scroll down to find that, we'll see garden here, and the description will be, "You are in a beautiful garden, smell the flowers, witness the ominous clouds." And if we go back to the browser, you see that that's the text that we're seeing here in the output. I'm going to jump back to the code and scroll back up. So once we've added that item to the log array, we're done with this move to function. Now remember, we're inside of another function right now. As PHP is processing this, we ran the move to function from the run command function. So let's go ahead and jump back to run command. I'm going to scroll back up here. So here we are in the run command function. We just evaluated that code, and now we're going to be done with this if statement. We're going to skip this else because that's not going to execute right now. And then we're done with the function. Now we've been jumping around the code a lot, so it may be a little hard to remember where we started from. But for this code, the set of processing lines is actually pretty small. So if we roll down here to near the bottom of the page, right here is where the processing begins, and here's where it ends. So what happened here, so we checked for the command and we ran it. And that's where we've been so far. We've been inside of this process. Now we're done with it. So our next step is to develop the log array and print it out to the interface. So we're going to check the count of the log array. At this point, there will be just 1, which is the description of the new place that we moved to. So because 1 isn't less than 1, we're not going to run this code, so we can skip it. And then we're rendering the log array as a list. Again, we just have 1 item here. And then we're rendering the inventory list, which is still empty at this point. So it will just display our default text. And if we scroll down here to the interface, everything is the same here, except our log has some slightly different text in it.